So this is the resistance report for day 524 since October 7th. It's ceasefire day 54, such as it is, as Nora reported off the top. It's not much of a ceasefire at this point. It's been structurally violated by Israel in dozens, scores of ways, more than 1,000 times since it went into effect. And phase one expired and was supposed to roll over to phase two. That was guaranteed. The guarantors of that agreement are the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, and Israel has violated that. And the most pronounced violation, besides the murderous violations that Nora reported on at the beginning of the show, and we've been covering here for the last month, is that on March 2nd, the Prime Minister's office in Israel announced a total blockade on goods, supplies, and goods and supplies to Gaza as the phase one of the deal expired, a total blockade in violation of the ceasefire that was agreed upon. So, in response to these violations by Israel, Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces, who have observed the ceasefire since day one, announced the resumption of their naval blockade against Israel. Their naval blockade began in November 2023 in solidarity with Gaza. They said they would not remove that naval blockade, which is against ships going to port in Israel or Israeli linked ships, until the siege on Gaza ended. They, in good faith, observed the ceasefire that went into effect January 19th. And as Brigadier General Yahya Sari said this week, this blockade will continue until the crossings to Gaza are reopened and humanitarian aid, including food and medicine, is allowed to enter. So let's take a look at some of the map. We've got some mapping resources, and we'll take a little bit of a look back at the way that this has unfolded since November 2023. So we're looking at the key corridors. Of course, Israel's up there in the upper left. In the bottom center there, you see Yemen, and you see, crucially, the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Off the Gulf of Aden there into the Red Sea. That is one of the choke points off the Yemeni coast that the Yemeni armed forces have enforced the blockade through. The two main ports in Israel are through the Red Sea that you see up running from right to left up your map there. You can see it moving in at the top of the Red Sea. That goes into the port at Eilat in southern Israel. And of course, if you go to the left there, you cross the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean and you reach the port of Ashdod, which is just north of Gaza. So that is the map that we're looking at. The main targeting area that Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces are talking about is the Bab el-Mandab Strait there between Djibouti, between Africa and Yemen there, that you see that choke point, a historic choke point of trade and an area of operations that is relevant to what we are talking about today, that key transit point. If we look at the next map, we can see an events map. This is from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Tracker, a political violence tracker. They have logged the events. You can see 164 events ending through the week of March 7th. And you can see the dots there in the Bab el-Mandab Strait, where much of the targeting is. They log the 136 attacks. It should be said that these are not attacks. They're not full frontal attacks on shipping. The ships are warned, they're diverted, there's warning shots that make up the vast majority of those 136 attacks that are listed. Those attacks also include attacks on U.S. naval vessels, military vessels patrolling in the area as well. There's been at least 6 frontal assaults on U.S. aircraft carriers in the area. But for as far as shipping is concerned, it is a warning not to travel through the area. Of course, this began in November 2023. People may remember when the Galaxy Leader, an Israeli owned ship, was boarded and taken over by the Yemeni armed forces, and its crew held captive in good conditions. We saw lots of videos of them in support, in solidarity with what was happening in Gaza. And that ship, the Galaxy Leader, the first day of the ceasefire in Gaza, the Galaxy Leader crew was released. There's been a single fatal attack in March 2024. 3 sailors were killed, but other than that incident, this has been effectively there has been no other casualties in this. 30 ships have been damaged after they ignored multiple warnings. And this is all takes place under the Naval Blockade Task Force of the Yemeni Armed Forces. They call it the Yemeni Armed Forces Humanitarian Operations Coordination Center. And they research and get intelligence on ships. Because the ships change flags, fly flags of convenience, try to disguise their ownership and their destinations. And when those ships that have done that arrive in port in Israel, they're then warned when they're in port in Israel that they have been notified of being sanctioned. And the Yemeni armed forces stress that if they persist in this multi-layered warning system, then they are targeted. And they stress that they use the methodology of the US Saudi blockade on Yemen, the brutal naval blockade on Yemen that matched with the Saudi US war that began in May of 2015. So they're using criteria that was used against them, a blockaded country, to use against Israel in a humanitarian intervention that they say matches international law's requirements on stopping genocide, on intervening in a genocide that's going on. If we look at this next map here, we can see this is an attack chart. Map, you can see the number of vessels over the course of the 16 months since the war in Gaza began. And if you look at the line graph in the upper left corner, tracking it across the screen, you can see that transits through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait have gone below half, from 2,000 down to below 1,000, according to the Lloyd's Lloyd's of London list intelligence. They're down from 2,068 crossings in November 2023 to 877 1 year later. So they've had a material impact on shipping in the region to Israel. The attacks have carried out in a number of phases. They have been escalated as the war escalated. They went from Israeli-owned ships to ships that were servicing Israeli ports, to British and UK ships. Once the Brits and the Americans started bombing onshore in Yemen, they expanded this. And of course, in the final phase, Yemen began targeting Israel with drones, targeting Israeli soil with drones and ballistic missiles. We've, of course, covered that on the Resistance Report for the last year and a half. Of course, Yemen has been the subject of more than 700 American and Israeli airstrikes on their territory as well during this time, which have killed orders of magnitude more than the 3 sailors that have been killed during this naval blockade. If we look at the next map, you can just see, or the next graph, you can just see it's pretty obvious when the blockade, the Yemeni Armed Forces blockade begins. You can see vessels through the Suez Canal drop off. You can see car carriers, which are the main source of the port at Eilat on the Red Sea. The Israeli port of Eilat is a car carrier port. You can see those drop to virtually zero. And you can see in the upper right corner the change in transits through the Suez Canal of valuable cargo. So you can see the car carriers are down by more than 90%, virtually 100%. You can see the crude oil tankers are down by more than 50%. And you can see the bulk LNG, liquid natural gas carriers down 70%. So significant material impact of this blockade, which is also a political action to press other countries to join. In December, at the port of Eilat, the chief executive told Reuters, this is December 2023, right after the beginning of the blockade, that arrivals had dropped 85% at the port of Eilat by March 2024. They're talking about 0 vehicles arriving at the port. And by July 2024, they're talking about bankruptcy at the port. The port CEO is talking to the Knesset's Economic Affairs Committee, saying that there had been no activity at the port for 8 months and no revenues at all coming in. So the ceasefire allowed the resumption to some degree of these, but now it is back in effect. And it went into effect with a video that we're going to show here in a moment, where that the Yemeni armed forces published. Siege for a Siege, it's called. And you're going to see Ansar Allah political leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi declare, he's going to say, "We declare to the world, we will give a 4-day deadline for the entry of aid into Gaza." This was earlier this week, end of last week. And it says on screen that it's a 4-day deadline. And Abdel Malik al-Houthi says, "We will resume our naval operations against the Israeli enemy. Our message is absolutely clear. We will respond to siege with siege." But it's a solid information operation. So we're going to watch that video in its entirety now.
العالم أجمع أننا سنعطي مهلة 4 أيام. فإننا سنعود باستئناف عملياتنا البحرية ضد العدو الإسرائيلي. كلامنا واضح تماما، ونقابل الحصار بالحصار.
So yeah, solid information operations, letting everybody know what's happening. They showed there in that video 2 ships have been sunk. 2 ships have been sunk during this blockade. And Abdel Malik al-Houthi on Monday said that we granted the 4-day deadline. The deadline is to allow the mediators to continue their efforts. If after those 4 days the Israeli enemy persists in preventing the entry of aid into Gaza and maintains complete closure of the crossings and continues to block the entry of food and medicine into Gaza, we will resume our naval operations in the area of responsibility that we showed you on that map earlier. Abdel Malik al-Houthi said, "It is the responsibility of Arab and Islamic governments to ensure the entry of aid into Gaza and to ensure that they exert maximum pressure to make it happen. We remind Arab and Islamic governments of their responsibility to be held accountable, knowing that many of them are indifferent to the ensuring of aid entry into Gaza." So a message, political message, a material message, a demonstrative pressure on other governments to to not allow this blockade of Gaza to continue. The expiration of that 4-day threat ended this week, and the naval blockade went into effect at midnight on Wednesday. So they gave time to prepare. And if we look at this next slide, you can see also that they issued this warning here, which you see an hourglass at the top. You see a ship with the 4-day warning, and then the ship being targeted underneath. Yahya Sari, Brigadier General Yahya Sari of the Yemeni Armed Forces, said in support of, this is what he said at the deadline at the end of the 4 days at midnight on Wednesday. He said, in support of and in victory for the oppressed Palestinian people and its dear fighters, and after the expiration of the deadline granted by Saeed Abdul Malik Badruddin al-Houthi to the mediators to pressure the Israeli enemy into reopening the crossings and allowing aid into Gaza, and due to the mediators not being able to achieve this, the Yemeni armed forces confirm the following. First, the resumption of a ban on the passage of all Israeli ships in the designated area of operations, which includes the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, Bab el Mandab, and the Gulf of Aden. Secondly, this ban takes effect immediately from the moment of this announcement, which was yesterday at midnight, Wednesday at midnight. Number three, any Israeli ship that attempts to break this ban will be targeted within the declared area of operations. And number four, this ban will remain in place until the crossings into the Gaza Strip are reopened and humanitarian aid, including food and medicine, is allowed to enter. The Yemeni armed forces salute the steadfast Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and affirm that, with God's help, they stand alongside the valiant Palestinian resistance. And Islamic Jihad and Hamas both welcomed the announcement, underscoring the unity of fields. Islamic Jihad said the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine praises the statement issued by the Yemeni armed forces in which they announced the resumption of their operations against the Zionist entity ships in the Red Sea and Arabian Sea. This bold step aims to pressure the entity and its sponsors to reopen the crossings and allow humanitarian aid into the besieged Gaza Strip. We welcome this courageous stance, which reflects the authenticity and bravery of the Yemeni people in supporting our brothers in Gaza and backing the cause of the Palestinian people and their resistance. It affirms the unity of the position against the occupation and against oppression. Through this announcement, the Yemeni people have demonstrated their unwavering commitment to supporting the Palestinian people and standing by the resistance in the face of this ongoing Zionist aggression. So, obviously, noted by the resistance factions in Gaza that this blockade is one way, and the world has been silent on this, as we've been reporting on the show throughout. And this is the one state, Yemen, that has been speaking up in defense and acting in defense of the blockade on Gaza. So that is the blockade. The Yemeni armed forces have also been busy with their second war, which is with U.S., and they downed another Reaper drone. If we look at slide number 7, this is Ansar Allah versus the United States Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drone over Hudaydah, Yemen. This is at least the 13th drone downed since October 7th. You can see it there being blown up. And the 16th since 2017, U.S. Central Command acknowledged that it had lost contact with the Reaper over the Red Sea. Again, Brigadier General Yahya Sari said, our air defenses have successfully shot down a hostile American MQ-9 aircraft while it was violating Yemeni airspace and carrying out hostile missions over the airspace of Al Hudaydah Governorate. And according to the Yemeni Armed Forces, this is the 15th aircraft that our air defenses have successfully downed since the battle began. So that is another $30 million Reaper drone. And in the next slide, I made a little mixtape for you guys showing the 10 other parts of the 10 other downings of the Reaper drones that have happened. in the last year. So we're basically talking about essentially one a month. We have had confirmation of at least 12 of them, and Central Command admits to at least 12. This one that I just showed was the 13th. And these are in previous over the last year. I've shown you all these drone strikes, all these dropping of these drones. These are MQ-9 Reapers, $30 million drones. They're armed drones. They carry two 500-pound bombs, 8 Hellfire missiles, and we have seen these drones downed with those weapons intact, which means that the Yemenis have access to reverse engineer those weapons. And again, the agreed upon cost, generally the agreed upon cost is 33 million per unit of these drones, although the United States Air Force original construction cost was 50 million. And so we're watching here on your screen about $500 million in US drones being shot out of the sky by locally made, locally assembled at least, surface to air missiles that the Yemeni armed forces has been using. We believe there to be carrying these out with the 358, which is a surface to air missile that has cruise missile and loitering munition capabilities in it. And they have been used, as we've seen, to devastating effect. It's believed that Hezbollah was using those to take down Israeli drones during the war in Lebanon. Although, again, we're not seeing the actual weapon being used. So they have been interdicted by U.S. Navy vessels, again, in their blockade of Yemen. And we have seen those parts, and we saw footage of the 358 at a Iranian weapons show that was attended by the Russians. But there's no direct confirmation that that's the weapon that is being used. But as you can see, it is a very effective tool. And these drones are, like I said, they're armed. They're carrying out surveillance missions for the onshore attacks that are carried out by fighter jets that take off from the aircraft carriers. And if we look at number 9, you can see how the Americans respond to this. This is Stars and Stripes, the U.S. Armed Forces media. This is how they responded to the one this week. The first drone I showed you was this week being taken down. And the headline is U.S. drone lost over the Red Sea on the same day as the Houthis claim MQ-9 Reaper downing. And in that article, it's a pretty classic way that the U.S. has dealt with this. A U.S. military MQ-9 Reaper drone disappeared over the Red Sea the same day Houthi militants in Yemen claimed to have shot one down. Claimed, they showed us on video. U.S. Central Command lost contact with the drone on Monday, said the official who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The day given by the official coincides with one in an X post by the Houthis, where they had downed a Reaper in a coastal region of Yemen with a surface-to-air missile. It's unclear whether the Houthis were responsible for the loss of the drone. They were responsible for the loss of the drone. And if we look at the next slide, I also wanted to point this out. The battle between the Yemeni armed forces and the U.S. aircraft carriers also led to this in December, which we didn't get a chance to report on, but I wanted to bring your attention to it while we're doing this coverage of Yemen. The U.S. Shot down its own fighter jet during an attack by the Yemenis on the Truman aircraft carrier that you see there in that photo. They shot down an F-18 Super Hornet, a $70 million jet with a $2.5 million interceptor missile. These interceptor missiles are used to shoot down the Yemeni drones that cost roughly the amount of a family car. The SM2s are 2.5 million, but they also fire SM3s at these incoming drones and cruise missiles that are fired at the warships, and the SM-3s can range from $9 to $30 million for the interceptor, for a single interceptor missile. So you see the asymmetric warfare financially revealed financially happening between the Yemeni armed forces and the Americans. And there's been, like I reported earlier, there's been 6 direct confrontations with U.S. aircraft carriers patrolling in the area. And a senior Pentagon official told Fox News that so far the Navy has shot down and intercepted all of the missiles and drones fired at their warships, but sometimes the interceptors have occurred only seconds before impact. There have been numerous close calls, and the U.S. Navy, in essence, has been at war in the Red Sea for the past 2 years, facing near constant attacks by Houthi ballistic and cruise missiles and drones, and firing expensive SM-2 and SM-3 missiles to counter the Houthi harassment. Senior military leaders believe that it is only a matter of time before one of these missiles hits a U.S. naval vessel and can cause extensive damage to an aircraft carrier or to the destroyers that are in the aircraft carrier strike group. An aircraft carrier is a $4.5 billion piece of weaponry. And the aircraft carrier strike group has 2 guided missile destroyers, 2 anti-aircraft warships, and 1 or 2 anti-submarine destroyers and frigates. So these $1 billion outlay to fight against the Yemeni armed forces. And again, so this shows you that they shot down their own jet. They claim they shot down their own jet. There's an investigation that has not been released yet into that. The pilots ejected safely from their $70 million jet. But this was a story that we didn't get to cover, and I wanted to put this on the radar. And just to come full circle, number 14, the MQ-9s, the Reaper drones, are not simply off the shore of Yemen. This is an illustration from a flight tracker from the New York Times showing that these MQ-9 Reapers are also over Gaza. The Reaper drone can fly for 24 straight hours, and you can see the path, the flight path from early in the war of these MQ-9 Reapers. They fly at about 26,000 feet over Gaza, just doing these loops. And of course, we know that the US and Israel operate a fusion center where military intelligence from the US is gathered and logistics is given to the Israelis. So this whole war all along has been a US Israeli war on Gaza. But these Reaper drones really showcase that. So I just wanted to bring that in full circle. And that is the update from Yemen on the blockade. And that is the resistance report for this week, day 54 of the ceasefire.